Today, 600 million people worldwide watch podcasts. 1/3 of US adults get their daily news from shows like Joe Rogan, Theo Von, and the Nelk Boys. So it shouldn't surprise you that secret government agencies around the world have a vested interest in what's being said. They can create narratives, they can control conversations to make themselves look good, and they can silence anyone who speaks against the story they want you to hear. Some of your favorite podcasts might already be influenced by governments and by people you wish you didn't know about. Behind the scenes, they pressure, manipulate, and even threaten entire podcast empires, all without you ever knowing. Because these agencies know that these shows shape the worldview of 600 million people, and they understand the power of having influence over the voices you trust. No government knows this better than Israel, because Israel uses its intelligence agencies to pressure your favorite podcasters into talking about what Israel wants them to talk about, believing what Israel wants them to believe, seeing the world the way Israel wants them to see it.
And so I started just getting real paranoid. I started getting real paranoid at home. I was paranoid about the show, like if there could be somebody in the audience, It just I think it made me really scared, to be honest with you.
In today's video, we're uncovering the Israeli influence on some of your favorite podcasts and how they twist, pressure, and even cause paranoia inside the podcast hosts you love so much. Theo Von is one of the biggest podcast hosts in America. He runs one of the biggest podcasts in America, and he has never shied away from voicing his opinions on politics. He endorsed Trump in 2024 and was a part of the podcast crew that helped Trump win in the 2024 election, but he was also concerned about another political issue at that time, which was the Israel-Gaza war, and he made his opinions heard when he released a podcast he filmed with Dr. Gabor on October 16th, 2024. In this podcast, Theo broke down after hearing about what Israel was doing in Gaza and after hearing what Dr. Gabor saw from first-hand experience when he went there 2 years ago.
Imagine some kid over there in Gaza looking up and there's a bomb, they think, man, I'm so horrible, I deserve to be bombed. That's crazy. I hadn't thought about that. Imagine that, though.
There was a study done of children in Palestine, and 95%, this is long before the current horrors, long before October the 7th, long before the aftermath of October the 7th. 95% of those kids showed traumatic symptoms. High percentage wet their beds, like you and I did. They expressed aggression towards their parents. They had panic attacks, anxiety, fears. Can you imagine what's going to happen to that generation?
Years from now?
Years from now. I mean, it just breaks my heart every day when I think about it.
But coming into 2025, Theo Von was even more concerned with the Israel-Gaza war, and in particular when it comes to America's relationship with Israel. He carried on voicing his opinion on this vocally. On his podcast on May 10th, 2025, he posted a solo episode called Big Guy. In this episode, he talked about a plethora of different things, but one thing he talked about really stuck out, and that was to take on what Israel was doing in the Gaza Strip. He was visibly emotional and upset after seeing what Israel has done there, as he would voice his opinions very openly about how much he dislikes Israel's behavior in the Gaza Strip.
There's a conflict that's been happening in the Middle East. People know about it. Between Israel and Palestine and some of the areas over there, the Gaza area they talk about. And I just think it feels to me, I don't know if it feels to me like it's a genocide that's happening while we're alive here in front of our lives.
Theo Von wouldn't just stop calling out Israel's actions right there. No, he would bring on these concerns directly to the Vice President, J.D. Vance. The podcast episode where he brings this up to J.D. Vance is called The Past Weekend J.D. Vance, and it was uploaded on June 7th, 2025. In the interview, he expresses his concern about Israel's hold on America and what they're doing in Gaza. He doesn't dance around it. He says how it is to his face. But J.D. Vance has a different point of view. This is mainly because J.D. Vance supports Israel and has been called a steadfast supporter of Israel throughout the country's war in Gaza. And his entire career was also heavily funded by the likes of Peter Thiel. The same Peter Thiel who once said, and I quote, "I defer to Israel." So naturally J.D. Vance pushed back slightly on what Theo Von was saying in this clip, on this podcast episode.
It's the sickest thing I think it's ever been televised. Basically, if you consider watching something on your phone being
very
televised,
sad, man.
It's It feels like a massacre, and it feels like, you know, I've called it a genocide. Other people have different thoughts about it, and that's fine, right? And I don't need anybody to share the same thoughts, or you two. But I think where it gets scary is that we give, you know, we're complicit in it because we help fund like military stuff, you know, and that's where as like a regular guy, you're like, well, I'm paying these taxes and they're going towards this, like, but you can't do anything, you know, like you can talk, you know, but it's like, you can't, I don't understand how it becomes like tough for people. Like sometimes it feels like we look out for the interests of Israel before we look out for the interests of America.
So let me say a couple things. So number one, like, I think you're a great dude, so we don't always have to agree on everything. Do I think do I think it's a genocide? No, and here's the reason why I don't think it's a genocide, because I don't think that the Israeli...
After the podcast, this clip would go viral on Twitter and many other social media platforms, with many people criticizing J.D. Vance for his denial of the Gaza genocide and underplaying the severity of what Israel is doing. At the same time, people were praising Theo Von for his willingness to bring this up to someone like J.D. Vance, because bringing something as serious as this to the Vice President can cause you to have some issues, as Theo Von would later find out. Months later, he would start to suffer from paranoia. He would start to feel like he is being targeted, not by a person, but by the entire government, due to his outspoken beliefs against the United States government's involvement in the Middle East. He would especially feel this paranoia when the US government used a clip of him in their DHS ad. He even stated himself that a high US government official sent him a text warning him and telling him to get extra security, as Theo Von believes that there are certain unknown forces out there trying to target him and get him.
Fuck, this is scary. And that Charlie Kirk thing had happened I think a couple weeks before. And so I started just getting real paranoid. Yeah. You know, I started getting real paranoid at home. I was paranoid about the show. Like if there could be somebody in the audience, you know, like, oh yeah. It just like, I think it made me really scared, to be honest with you.
And this isn't the only time Theo has felt paranoid for his well-being. Not even close. During one of his comedy shows, he seemed genuinely distressed. Something was very wrong. You could see it in his face, in his body language. Everything fell off that night. And then he began saying something very worrying.
I don't know what to tell you about that, man. I'm having a long month. I'm trying not to take my own life. So I just want to get these
People didn't know how to react. This entire incident was caught on camera. What did he exactly mean by this? Was he threatening in any sort of way? Or is this deeper than it meets the eye? Because Theo Von is talking to the most powerful people in the world. Billionaires, presidents, Hollywood celebrities, influential figures that shape our daily lives. Are they the ones giving him paranoia? Or are there even more powerful people behind the shadows pulling pulling the strings and making him feel unsafe? Who was the government official who warned Theo about his safety? Why hasn't the name been released? And why is this all happening right when he's become a more vocal voice against Israel? Something seems too coincidental here. Ultimately, this is all speculative, so take it with a grain of salt, because only Theo Von himself knows what's really going on behind the scenes. But Theo would continue to voice his disdain for what Israel is doing in Gaza. He wouldn't back down, and he would also talk about how he's feeling unsafe nowadays, openly on record for millions to hear. He would become even more vocal about Israel's relationship with the United States when Trump declared war on Iran in February 2026. Theo Von would say on his podcast that this war does not benefit any of the American people. It only benefits the military-industrial complex. He would even go as far to say that Donald Trump himself is compromised and controlled by Israel, but he would go further with his beliefs when he went on the Joe Rogan podcast to discuss the great worry he has because of this war, the worry he has for himself, his opposition to the war in Iran, and much more.
But it's all the same shit has been happening forever. They haven't been helping anybody forever. They're letting fucking politicians slurp on kids. All of our fucking money goes to Israel and they're using it to fucking genocide people. It's like everybody is scared out of their wits right now. It's like our religious leaders are afraid to speak out. And it's like it's a time where it's like Satan is amongst us and our religious leaders are fucking talking about bullshit.
Theo Von is rightfully concerned here. He is worried about Israel's endless war in the Middle East and the repercussions that it brings to not just America, but the entire world in general. He feels unsafe, like a lot of us do, because it is now an unstable time in the Western world. As now Theo Von sees the truth and also faces the same worry we face, while also having the added worry of receiving threatening messages from powerful people for his oppositional stance against what the elites want. He would start to even slam Trump even further, the man he was once endorsing, the man he once brought onto his podcast, is now becoming the man he dislikes the most, all because of this war in Iran. Theo Von would slam Trump for his Truth Social post on Easter, where Trump in his Truth Social post talked about wanting to annihilate Iran, which is completely the opposite of what he said before, as he was saying he wanted to liberate Iran. Theo would obviously disavow Trump's threatening remarks towards Iran and say that Trump is, quote, completely off the rails now.
After Trump's tweet on Easter, just tweeting about the annihilation of people. Bring up the tweet so I can be clear on what it is. Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the fucking straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah, President Trump. I mean, that's just, on Easter, that's unbelievable. To write that it's diabolical. It's insane. And what American is this helping? Besides the war, the industrial war complex, what American, what hard work, what guy who's trying to take care of his family, or a single mother who's a nurse who's going to work and has to get home and get to her kid's ball game and has to be both parents. What farmer is this helping? What regular person is this helping? I just don't know. I don't understand. That's what our president's up to, and it's baffling.
But Theo Von isn't the only one to suddenly denounce Trump and suddenly become critical of Israel and face pushback due to his stances on being in opposition to Israel. Joe Rogan is also very much like Theo in this regard, as Joe Rogan used to support Israel and ignore their bad actions. Joe Rogan hosts the biggest podcast in the entire world, and so what Joe Rogan says can sway political outcomes times, as he has a YouTube channel with 20 million subscribers and has the most listened to podcast on Spotify. Joe Rogan was once very sympathetic to Israel, as he believed that Israel was fighting terror in the Middle East. He would buy into this idea that supporting Israel is a good idea because America is defending the only democracy in the Middle East. Throughout the 2010s and early 2020s, he would have pro-Israeli voices like Dan Crenshaw, Jocko Willink, Sam Harris, and Ben Shapiro, who would reinforce Joe Rogan's idea that Israel was this bastion for freedom, as he had never seen the other side or even had the opportunity to talk to the opposing view on this issue, even though he was talking at this time about UFOs, aliens, and having anti-establishment voices who would go on to talk about their own conspiracy theories. The only thing he would not go on to talk about was Israel. He would even mock people who would bring this up to him by saying to them that they believe that Israel is behind everything, but he would not give the same treatment to other beliefs or theories. But this would begin to change on October 7th, 2023. The October 7th attack happened, and Joe Rogan would be quick to condemn the acts of Hamas and express a great amount of sympathy towards the Israeli people. At this time, Joe Rogan was supportive of the idea of Israel's right to retaliate against the people who did this, but little did Joe know Israel wasn't going to just retaliate against Hamas. They were going to enact an act of genocide on the entire population of Palestine. Months after the attack, Joe Rogan would begin to realize that Israel wasn't actually just retaliating against Hamas, but they were attacking innocent civilians and children. Joe Rogan would start to take an oppositional stance to what Israel was doing, as he saw the reality of this war on the ground. He would see distressing videos of men, women, and children being harmed by what Israel was doing on the ground. Then in March 2024, on his podcast featuring Kurt Metzger, he would start to make his opinions on this more public and clearer. He would take an oppositional stance against Israel by calling what they were doing in Gaza, quote, small-scale genocide. Both Metzger and Rogan throughout the podcast were critiquing the IDF and Zionist liberals who, on one hand, talk about how much they're against racism, yet support a country that is considered the most racist country in the entire world. They would continue to talk about this throughout the entire podcast.
But they would push this shit like we're all in this together. And then that's when you start seeing the Instagrams of like, I stood with immigrants because blah blah blah. I stood with BLM and I stood with gays, and now I stand alone because I am a Jew. Did you see that getting passed around?
Yeah.
And that's the moment when I knew, right there. It was like, oh, you're like that ADL piece of shit was shocked. You're not going to back us up all the way on this thing?
They're only targeting Hamas and everybody else is a casualty. Well, if those guys are just unarmed civilians and they're walking alone, that's what they appear to be.
Dresden.
And you just blast them from the sky with robots.
This is the tragedy of war.
Yeah, this is insane. And no one knows what to think now, because if you can't talk about that, if you can't say that's real, then you're saying that genocide is okay as long as we're doing it. And
that is what we're saying.
And if you're saying that from a perspective of someone who literally went through the Holocaust, or your people, your tribe, went through the fucking Holocaust, and now you're willing to do it?
I hope the irony's not lost on you.
After the release of this podcast, Joe Rogan faced a massive amount of backlash for his comments, especially from Israeli media, the Democratic majority for Israel, and many pro-Israel commentators online. The criticism was intense and came from both the political right and left. But this would not be the end of Joe Rogan's skepticism towards Israel. What happened next would spark a level of backlash he had never experienced before. Rogan brought on Dan Daryl Cooper, an alternative historian known for criticizing the actions of Israel and Winston Churchill. The podcast released on March 14, 2025, and this caused an uproar unlike anything Rogan had faced in his career. Joe Rogan had been criticized by woke liberals before, but never to this extent, never this personally, never this coordinated. Now even former friends and even past guests were turning against him. Figures such as Sam Harris, Douglas Murray, and Ben Shapiro publicly criticized Rogan over his views on Israel. Large organizations like the Anti-Defamation League also condemned Rogan for platforming Cooper, calling for consequences and demanding explanations. What makes this especially interesting is that commentators like Douglas Murray and Ben Shapiro, who often present themselves as defenders of free speech, strongly opposed Rogan giving Cooper a platform. The very people who built their careers on defending the right to free speech were now demanding that Cooper's freedom of speech be silenced. Regardless of what you think about Cooper, he has the right to give his view on the world. If we truly live in a free society, then Cooper should have the right to express his views on the world. The only exception to this rule is if he was advocating for violence against people, which he was not doing on the podcast. The backlash Joe Rogan received was severe, and it did not come from just one side of the political spectrum. Both the right wing and the left wing united in attacking Joe Rogan for his more aggressive critiques of Israel. One of the biggest critics of this podcast was Douglas Murray. Douglas Murray is a conservative who is against wokeness and against the tactics woke people use to censor individuals they don't like. Yet when it came to Daryl Cooper, he believes that Joe Rogan should not have given him a voice. I find it interesting that Douglas Murray is supposedly a free speech warrior who speaks up against the British government for censoring free speech, yet he was advocating for Cooper not to have a voice on the Joe Rogan podcast. The contradiction here is stunning, but Douglas Murray was calling out Joe Rogan nonetheless, and this would lead up to a debate on the Joe Rogan experience between Douglas Murray and another Israel critical voice, Dave Smith. Dave Smith is a part of the right-wing sphere and is also critical of Israel. This debate would become one of the most infamous episodes on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Have you been to the crossing points?
No.
When were you last there at all?
I've never been.
You've never been?
Well, am I not allowed to talk about it now? I've never been to. Have you ever been to Nazi Germany? Are you allowed to have feelings about them?
You can't time travel, but you can.
Well, right.
But you can travel.
Okay, but so what? So what's the point? Like,
no,
okay.
I find that
lots of people have been there and agree with me, and lots of people have been there and agree with you.
Yeah, but
so
if
I don't
you're
know
going
what
to spend a year and a half talking about a place, you should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
All right. I just think this is a non-argument.
You don't
but
think?
Okay. No, I think it's a non-argument.
But if you're next,
Well, you have to go and touch the ground. To
no,
be
I
able
think
talk
you have
about
to
it?
see. I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you
okay.
spend a career talking about something. Yes, I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
Okay,
It's
but that's
sort of
not
normal. It's a normal thing to do. You're talking about. Hang on. You're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay. Again, I think this is a non-argument. I don't understand.
No, it's not a non-argument.
Yeah, it is.
After this debate was uploaded, it would go viral with Joe Rogan's audience and people generally online believing that Dave Smith won the debate, as they were also making fun of Douglas Murray's argument about Dave Smith not going to Palestine, so that somehow means he cannot have a take on it.
Have you been there? Right, that's a good point. You haven't been? By the way, how is he in all these wars? Can I just go to wars? By the way, how are you allowed to just go to wars Is
you
that the way
haven't- you should at
Can
least
you just
have the
go to war?
courtesy of going there.
Can I just go to wars, or do I have to come back and say what people want me to say about the wars?
This is, of course, a dumb argument because, on the same hand, Douglas Murray can't say anything about the Christian genocide in Nigeria because, well, he hasn't been there, so he cannot make that claim either. You don't need to personally visit somewhere to know what's going on there. We know that there is a genocide happening in both Nigeria and in Palestine because this isn't the 14th century anymore. The internet exists. As for Joe Rogan, though, he would continue to defend his stances on Israel committing genocide regardless of whether his guests believed that or didn't. He stood by his position even as the pressure mounted from all sides. But one podcast that censors the crimes of Israel and downplays them is a podcast you would least expect. A podcast that is goofy on the surface and may be more sinister than what we believe it to be. And that podcast is the Full Send Podcast. This podcast was created by the Nelk Boys, and the Nelk Boys originally started off as a prank channel and made their career through the early 2010s prank wave on YouTube. But they moved into the podcast genre by creating a channel called the Full Send Podcast. At first they didn't have political guests on, but that began to change around 2021 when they started bringing on the Trump family and even Donald Trump himself. So they were not shy about bringing political figures who wanted to convince their viewers into voting for them. But then they would bring on a guest that no one would expect, a guest who is the most hated man in the world at the moment, and this would cause a huge amount of controversy for doing so. On July 22nd, 2025, the Full Send Podcast would be interviewing Benjamin Netanyahu, a wanted war criminal by the ICC. This was an insane idea, and at the start even the Nelk Boys acknowledged that this was a controversial idea. They already knew what they were getting into by interviewing the most hated man in the world.
This is fucking nuts.
This
dude.
is so crazy. We are so not qualified to do this. That's what's interesting about this. We're just not. We just should not be doing this.
Well, we're too far too gone.
Here we have the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. He's about to walk into the podcast right now. This is probably one of the most, if not the most controversial podcast we
for sure the most
have ever done.
Yeah, 100%.
Maybe not the most controversial we'll ever do.
So you have Benjamin Netanyahu in the same room as you. The man is wanted by the ICC. He is accused of crimes against humanity and is the most hated man in the world. You could ask him about any of this. You could press him on the charges. You could ask him about the children, the hospitals, the journalists being killed in the Gaza Strip. But the Full Send Podcast decided to give him the softest interview of all time. Zero pushback to anything he said. No actual critical counter questions to anything Netanyahu said. They just let him talk unchallenged. It even got to the point where they were discussing their favorite Burger King order. A wanted war criminal is sitting in front of you and you're asking him about his favorite Burger King option. That is the most random and most ridiculous question you could possibly ask from someone like Netanyahu.
What's your go-to at McDonald's?
No, I'll tell you, Burger King. We did the double,
Whopper?
The double.
I haven't ripped Burger King in a long time.
Burger King kind of sucks.
Yeah.
No,
the
you're wrong.
BK Lounge can hit.
I disagree completely.
You like Burger King over McDonald's?
That's your worst take, I think.
Absolutely.
That's a crazy take.
No, that was fine. I mean, I like Burger King. The answer is yes.
After this interview, the video would go viral and Nelk would face a level of backlash they had never seen before. Even their own fans turned on them. The comment section was just criticism after criticism of how Nelk handled the situation. They were mocked and criticized by everyone. Comments poured in like, I miss when YouTube used to show dislikes. Another one said, reputation takes years to build and just seconds to ruin. Someone else wrote, when stupid meets evil. And another comment said, asking him if he prefers Burger King or McDonald's while people are starving. This is insane. These criticisms were endless for their weak interview. They were forced to respond, and in their response they admitted that they were not prepared for the interview. But right after this interview, they would bring on Bassem Youssef, who is a pro-Palestinian voice, to explain to them why their interview was a softball interview and the dangers of not asking the right questions to a person who is accused of crimes against humanity. Bassem didn't hold back. He told them exactly what they did wrong.
And I think the biggest part of you that you were not prepared, 2 years under like the biggest genocide in our history, you guys had no idea what's going on. If somebody told me, hey, you're going to be tomorrow on the starting five of the Lakers in the NBA, it's like, that's a great opportunity, but I'm not prepared. I'm not going to make a fool out of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about you platforming someone or someone giving a chance for free speech. You were used, right?
From this interview, it seemed like the Nelk boys were trying to repair their reputation by having Bassem Youssef on the next episode of the Full Send podcast. But the problem is, the damage was already done. You can't undo a moment like that with just one conversation. The internet doesn't forget, and neither did their audience. Now, this isn't exactly too surprising that this interview happened the way it did, because co-host of the Full Send podcast, Steiny, whose real name is Aaron Steinberg, is a supporter of Israel, and the Nelk boys themselves went to Israel as well for a vlog style video. So the signs were always there, you just had to pay attention. But this wouldn't compare to the Patrick Bet-David podcast, in particular the podcast's view towards the state of Israel. Patrick Bet-David started his podcast in 2020. The show began as a business and financial advice podcast where he and his co-host Adam Sosnick, and we will get to him in a moment, would discuss business and financial strategies. But the podcast really started to blow up around 2022 when they began bringing on celebrity guests, professional athletes, and more controversial figures. But what really launched them into the spotlight was their Andrew Tate interview, which got 15 million views. After that, they started to steer further away from business and financial advice and move toward the manosphere, and in particular the conservative influencer sphere online. This is when the issue of Israel was first brought up to them. Patrick Bet-David was always more pro-Israel, but Adam Sosnick was avidly pro-Israel and defends the state of Israel to this day. But after October 7th, like most people who were pro-Israel, Patrick Bet-David started to develop a more nuanced view on Israel and Palestine. He began seeing issues differently than he once had. But something would happen that would cause Patrick Bet-David to become more critical, and that was the Candace Owens and Daily Wire situation. Candace used to have one of the biggest shows on the Daily Wire, if not the biggest show on the entire network. She made her name in a very similar way to Patrick Bet-David, in the sense that they both gained popularity within the conservative influencer sphere. She also defended Israel at first, but just like everyone I've just mentioned, she became very critical after witnessing Israel's actions following October 7th. This was in direct conflict with what the Daily Wire believed. Its CEO, Jeremy Boring, at the time was avidly pro-Israel, and Ben Shapiro, well, he needs no introduction. He is closely aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu. This would eventually result in Candace Owens getting fired for speaking out against Israel's actions in the Middle East. Around this time, Patrick Bet-David didn't waste a chance and seized on this opportunity to call the Daily Wire out. He criticized the Daily Wire's bias and questioned why the network was willing to fire one of its biggest stars over the slightest criticism of Israel, which is a very fair point when you really think about it. It is ironic that the Daily Wire aligns itself with being Christian, in particular being Catholic, yet fires someone for calling out the genocide of innocent civilians. It is also odd that they have a person like Dave Rubin working working there as well. Dave Rubin and his husband gave birth to their child through IVF. That doesn't sound very Christian to me, yet they fire Candace Owens for simply criticizing Israel, something that even the Pope himself has been critical of. Patrick Bet-David was also pointing out the hold that Israel has on the conservative sphere, even calling out the Daily Wire for what he described as Israeli control. But Adam Sosnick had the complete opposite view to Patrick Bet-David. He sided with the Daily Wire, defended Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire's actions, and called Candace's firing from the Daily Wire completely justified. This caused them to discuss their differences on their podcast.
On substance or on policy? Meaning, I've never seen Ben Shapiro lose a debate. This guy knows what he's talking about.
Oh, I've seen.
But the one that got suspended got street credit.
Yeah,
That's how it works. I'm just telling you.
and that's exactly it.
Yeah.
But I mean,
If this is true.
if it's true, allegedly. But if you think about it, look at what this situation to me exposed the hell out of not only Ben, but Daily Wire as well. Because think about the hypocrisy too. All this stuff, like, hey, you want to debate, get the lawyers involved. Then a couple days, I think it was yesterday, Shapiro makes a video supporting Elon's reinstatement of Nick Fuentes on X.
But this divide between Adam Sosnick and Patrick Bet-David would not die down. It only got worse, as this eventually led to a debate between Adam Sosnick and Bassem Youssef. During the debate, Adam Sosnick defended and justified Israel's actions, arguing that Israel was the true victim in the war and the side being attacked. Bassem Youssef, on the other hand, pushed back against nearly every point Adam made and challenged his arguments throughout the discussion. What followed was an absolute train wreck of a debate.
Well, let me show some stats for you, because after you see these stats, Israel's the worst genociders ever. The numbers, according to the world data, if you trust data, between 1990 and 2022, the Palestinian population overall went from 2 million to 5 million, okay? Pretty bad at genocide if that's what's happening right there. In Gaza, it went from 645,000 to 2.1 million. It's 3x. That ain't genocide to me.
Again, 600,000 to what?
645,000 to 2.1 million.
From what to,
That's
from
in
when,
Gaza.
from when to where?
This is in 1990 to 2022.
Do you know
Pull it
why
up.
they increased?
Because they're having babies like crazy.
No. You see, this is how like when you watch data while being uninformed makes you look very stupid.
Tell me why. Tell me how the population has gone from 2 million to 5 million.
Yeah, because most of the 1.5 extra million didn't come from Gaza. They were pushed away from other parts of Israel. So most of these people, they have increased because of refugees being kicked out.
If you're talking about the settlers, those are tens of thousands. Stop
I'm talking
it.
about
those
Gaza.
aren't millions of people.
Dude, listen.
moving
My
their
wife's
houses.
family is not from Gaza, and yet they found themselves in Gaza because they were sitting in other cities and villages outside Gaza. This is the systemic pushing of people from other parts of Israel, pushing them
That's
to
not
Gaza.
millions of people. This is why I said that you're
1.5
intellectually
million.
dishonest or intellectually lazy.
No,
that's not the cause of millions of people being moved. I'm familiar with the settler stuff and the disengagement in 2006.
You don't know what you're talking about. These are people that
millions
were
of
outside.
people.
What?
Okay.
The people who belong to Gaza are 700,000 people. Right now, Gaza is 2.2 million. That is not birth rate, my friend. These are people pushed from, and by the way, that's not the first time. 1948, at the night of the declaration of the State of Israel, 1.5 million Palestinians were moved overnight. So it's not the first thing. So before you giving me numbers you want to appear smart, know what are behind the numbers, because these are not people giving babies.
Okay.
These are people being pushed from other places in order to be part of the open air prison that it is.
Okay, so then,
but this was nothing in comparison to Adam's debate against Dave Smith on Piers Morgan. When Trump declared war on Iran, Adam Sosnick praised Trump's actions. He believed that America should go to war against Iran. He argued that it was necessary, that it was justified, that it was the right move for national security. But little did Adam know, Dave Smith was more ready to face him in a debate Dave came prepared. He dismantled Adam's points piece by piece, talking about the military-industrial complex, the lack of benefit for everyday Americans, and the fact that war with Iran would only serve the interests of Israel. This would result in Adam getting completely destroyed in this debate against Dave Smith. It wasn't even close. This resulted in the Patrick Bet David fanbase turning against Adam Sosnick, and even they were saying Dave Smith destroyed Adam in this debate.
And if you want to keep doing this, buddy, you could tell me to check the scoreboard. I'll run circles around you on this, dude. Check the scoreboard. Most unpopular war in American history going in. Check the scoreboard. 13 dead Americans and 150 plus other wounded. Thousands of innocents, including little schoolgirls in Iran, killed. Dead innocent Israelis. Hundreds of dead innocent people in Lebanon. Millions of innocent people being displaced, all at the cost of tens of billions of dollars and destroying Trump's coalition. Check your scoreboard, Adam. How's it looking for you?
The aftermath of this debate resulted in the comments section being very critical of Adam Sosnick. People wrote things like, how Adam has survived online this long is actually a comedic miracle. Another comment said, yo Adam, APAC cold. They want their money back. Someone else wrote, Adam doesn't even know what he's trying to say. And then there's this comment that says, Adam dressed himself for his own funeral. The last one really summed it up. He walked into the debate looking confident and walked out looking completely lost. But things would get even worse for Adam somehow, because he would go on the Patrick Bet David podcast the very next day. During the podcast, Patrick asked Adam about the fact that people were attacking him for his awful debate performance on Piers Morgan. Patrick gave him a chance to address it, to apologize, to explain himself, to show some humility. And Adam replied by saying, I don't care. This enraged Patrick Bet David, because it is his job as a podcast host to care what the viewers think. This resulted in a very bad ending for Adam, as Patrick would school him and completely call him out.
They don't know what happens. I want you to share with us, because the audience is curious. They're asking me, what is your impression on how you did on the debate with Dave Smith?
Well, despite what you think, I haven't listened or watched any of the internet comments. Zero.
You.
I don't go onto Twitter. I don't check the comments. It's just not something that I do. Some people are messaging me on my neck. What do you think? I don't know. People are saying stuff, and I'm listening to a song called "Ain't Nothing Gonna Break a My Stride, Ain't Nothing Gonna Slow Me Down," and that's how I feel about this. So they told me last minute, "Hey, you're gonna go on Piers Morgan." Sure. I think Tom was maybe gonna do it. Tom wasn't able to do it. They called me up. I said, sure, I'll debate Dave Smith.
I've seen you make better arguments with Bassem Youssef than you did with Dave Smith. I didn't see you making arguments on Dave Smith. And the reason why I'm doing this with you openly, and I'm talking to you openly with you, is there's an element of also representing where you're coming from, where the expectation is, hey, when you go and be professionals, that's not how I handle debates. I don't handle debates that way. That's not my MO. So if you're close to me and you're handling it that way, that is not my style. I don't do stuff like that. And Dave and I don't even agree on some of these issues.
Adam Sosnick has now become the most hated person on the Patrick Bet David podcast, not just because of his debate performance, but because of his behavior and his extreme support for the state of Israel. And now fans are calling him to leave the podcast and by judging his viewership, it may be time for Adam to leave. But another podcaster who supports Israel is Ethan Klein, the owner of the H3H3 podcast. I've mainly been talking about more right-wing people in this video, but H3H3 is a liberal who is also a supporter of Israel. H3H3 made a big name for himself way back in 2016 with his now wife Hila Klein, and we will talk about her specifically in a moment. H3H3 then started to prioritize something else other than his main YouTube channel, a new podcast called the H3H3 podcast, which is now one of the most successful podcasts on the entire platform. It's still bringing in a lot of viewers to this day, and one of the co-hosts of this podcast is Hila, but things get quite controversial when it pertains to Hila Klein. Not too much on the surface, but when you look deeper, you will find that Hila Klein was a part of the IDF. Now, this was mandatory, so she was forced into doing it, but from what we know, she has never stated that she was opposed to the idea of forced conscription into the IDF. She has not spoken too much about her time in the IDF overall, but she did actually talk about it one time specifically, about her experiences in the IDF, particularly when it pertained to a raid she was involved in. That conversation happened on a H3H3 podcast episode, and it was later clipped on the H3 Highlights channel with a video called Hila from H3H3 discusses her time in the Israeli military, and that video was well questionable. You can be the judge of this one.
And your whole family served in the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
How was your experience in the military?
It was okay. At first, I was given a role that was like in an office somewhat close to my house in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like going to a day job in an office.
Mm.
I hated it. So I tried to change my role. And it was something like you can apply for it, and it's a form that you fill out, and then they're going to give you something else, completely random.
Different
you have no
position,
idea.
Different post,
Yeah,
different location. So you preferred that? Were you gone for a whole week?
I did.
Interesting. Why?
It was kind of like just more of an adventure, more of a different experience that I preferred than to just go to a boring job, sit on the computer and go back home at the end of every day. I don't know.
Were you doing secretary work there?
So, yeah, I was the secretary of the head of the, there's like a, I don't know the terms in English from the army.
Right. He was an officer.
So there was I was in Duchifat, which is like a brigade, I guess.
Once you went on like a mission with them
Mm-hmm.
to like a terrorist city?
Yeah.
That was kind of a crazy story.
Yeah, my officers and like the soldiers in that brigade, they would go every night on a raid
Right.
in Ramallah to arrest terrorists. And so I always saw them preparing for it and leaving, and then I would stay in the base.
Mm.
So one time I wanted to go with them just to experience it.
Why? You just were all of a sudden had an urge to go with them?
I just wanted to see what it's like.
Right.
I wanted to see it.
Okay. Was it like, how did you feel? Was it horrifying?
It was strange. Very, very weird.
How so?
I don't know. Just...
So Hila herself stated that she preferred to go on a mission rather than sit at her desk and not go into a literal war zone. She said that it was like an adventure. Make of that what you will, but it does seem odd that she was so nonchalant about it and completely emotionless about the whole thing. Most people wouldn't describe a war zone that way, but this isn't the only controversy that the H3H3 podcast has had due to the issue of Israel. H3H3 announced a new podcast project called Leftovers. Ethan Klein always had been more of a liberal, but he would be starting a podcast with the infamous Twitch streamer Hassan Piker. This was questionable at first because Ethan Klein is a Californian liberal Democrat, while Hassan is a radical revolutionary socialist. But regardless of this big difference, the podcast was doing well at first. The fans began to love it, and both Ethan Klein's and Hassan's communities would get along surprisingly well. It wasn't without controversy, of course. During the Leftovers podcast era, H3 would say something that would get him in trouble on his main podcast. He made a violent statement saying, and I quote, "Someone should bomb that building." This was in reference to the NRA annual convention. He later walked it back and said it was a joke, but the damage was already done. But things would get even worse for Ethan Klein as his Leftovers podcast with Hasan was coming to an end. And this was not due to both parties coming to an agreement and wrapping things up. No, this was a drama-filled ending which resulted in former friends becoming enemies. Things started to crack after the October 7th attacks. When these attacks happened, they were both visibly upset, and they both agreed that the violence was terrible. But when Israel became more unrelenting on the idea of peace and went on a warpath, Hasan started to make his opinions heard. Both could agree that Benjamin Netanyahu was the bad guy, but they totally disagreed on what should happen to Israel. Ethan Klein believes in a two-state solution. He thinks Israel has a right to exist alongside Palestine. Hasan, on the other hand, believes that Israel has no right to exist at all, and that Palestine should be free from the river to the sea. This obvious and fundamental disagreement would cause major conflict on the Leftovers podcast, as their last episode would be them discussing their differences. As this was the final episode of the Leftovers podcast, it seemed like they split away and agreed to disagree. Well, you would think that, but these online drama things never end this way. Ethan Klein would get an absolute hate storm from Hasan's deranged community. They started sending things to his house, including a literal skull, all because of his disagreements with Hasan. They would both become very critical of each other throughout 2024, and then Ethan Klein did something big, a nuke, a content nuke, you could say. On May 3rd, 2025, content nuke Hasan Piker was released. The video itself was critiquing Hasan's rhetoric, and he was mainly attacking Hasan's Houthi stream, where Hasan called the Houthis a musical people, which I wouldn't exactly call them that, but okay then. He also attacked Hasan's interview with an actual Houthi pirate, which is kind of insane. But this would all lead up to a debate between Hasan and Ethan Klein, and this debate was an absolute disaster. It made the Adam Sosnick Dave Smith debate on Piers Morgan look like a debate between Aristotle and Plato.
Now explain what he means by that. We did not leave Iraq because we were Zionists. We left because we were no longer safe.
Iraqis are not Palestinian, you moron, you racist piece of shit.
What?
Because Iraq and the pan-Arabic nationalist movements that arise out of
Zionist out of your mind
is not about Palestinians.
Okay, so what did the Jews in Iraq have to do with fucking Israel? You bigot!
Actually fucking
you are
the
so out of your mind.
And then Iraqis,
dude, you screaming and grandstanding doesn't mean you're right.
Iraqi government's racism during the pan-Arabic nationalist movements as a vindication for why, or a comparison as to why Israel had to do the Nakba.
Do you think that
racist piece of shit?
Thanks, Hasan.
Do you think Iraq? Do you think all Arabs have one fucking mind?
Why were the Iraqi Jews leaving Iraq in fear?
Of course there were Iraqi Jews that left Iraq in fear. I've never said that there were no
Answer
Iraqi
the question.
Jews that left
You want to
Iraq
call
in
me
fear.
racist? Why were Iraqi Jews leaving to go to Israel?
Because you're a moron.
That's why they left. They left because I'm a moron.
That Arabs are
Hasan,
not
you
one-minded.
coward.
That there
You
were numerous
coward.
pan-Arabic nationalist
Answer the
movements
question. You're going to
that
call
were
me
sparking
racist,
up
but you won't
all around
answer.
the region,
Why
Ethan.
did the Iraqi Jews leave Iraq?
There were numerous
Because of
reasons. Why did the Israeli
anti-Semitism.
government-
They hated Jewish people that had nothing to do with Israel. They were forced to leave.
Ethan Klein and Hasan suddenly became enemies because they disagreed about Israel. But I find it convenient that Klein was not questioning Hasan deeply about him saying America deserved 9/11 and calling him anti-American in the same way he calls Hasan to this day anti-Semitic. A lot of people sided with Ethan, which I understand, because on the surface he is slightly more reasonable than the two. But my problem with Ethan is his inconsistency. I'm not a fan of Hasan's politics at all. I want to make that clear, nor Hasan at all. But what did you expect? Hassan has radical views and you were nodding your head while he was saying extreme things about Christians, conservatives, and so on. But when it came to the state of Israel, you turned on Hassan. It was okay when he was dehumanizing conservatives, Christians, white people, and etc. You were applauding it or looking the other way. But when it comes to criticisms of Israel, you're calling him anti-Semitic. And not just that, Ethan Klein's entire ideology is completely inconsistent to begin with. You cannot be a Californian liberal and then be a supporter of a ethnocentric state embarking on genocide. It doesn't add up. You are ideologically inconsistent. But I do sympathize with how Klein was treated by Hassan's community and Hassan himself. This sort of behavior not only harms Ethan Klein's kids, who have nothing to do with any of this drama, but also harms any critiques of Israel. This is bad optics. Your average person seeing this is going to become completely disinterested in any sort of Israel critical opinions because it will now be associated with disgusting behavior, and ultimately the pro-Israeli voices would love nothing more than their opposition to be a group of freaks who send skulls to people's houses, because it would be easy to paint them as such. What they don't want is a group of people who are optically sound, intelligent, likable, reasonable, and convincing. That is their biggest fear, but from what we can see, the tide is turning. Israel, the state that once had influence over your favorite podcasts, is now losing that same influence. And now it is rare to see a podcast that defends Israel. The conversation has shifted and it's not shifting back. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.